Executive Office, and I call Tom Buchanan.
Number 1.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The competition to appoint a new Commissioner for Victims and Survivors was launched on Monday the 11th of November. The appointment of the new Commissioner is essential to inform the development of policies and help ensure that the longer-term needs of victims and survivors are addressed. This is a key priority for the Executive. We are keen that the new Commissioner is appointed as soon as possible and would encourage anyone who feels that they could fulfil the role to apply. The closing date for applications is 12 noon this Friday, the 29th of November, and we hope to appoint the new Commissioner early next year. The date of appointment may be impacted by any notice period that the successful candidate is required to serve from their previous position. The appointment process is regulated by the Commissioner for Public Appointments, and as such it must comply with the Code of Practice for Ministerial Public Appointments.
Mr Buchanan.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister, for a response. The Minister will be aware through social media of a sign erected in Castledare calling for the boycott of businesses, stating there is no alternative. Would the Minister agree that this is an incitement to hatred, an attack on the minority unionist culture, the business community, and is further intimidation experienced by many innocent victims over recent years? And will she join with me in condemning this action and calling on Derry City and Strabane Council to have it removed with immediate effect?
Order. Some distance from the question, the initial question, but I'll leave it in the hands of the First Minister, Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Indeed, I know that the erection of such a sign will have caused significant hurt and distress right throughout the community, but particularly to those victims and survivors. I absolutely agree with you. It's absolutely wrong. The Council should remove it immediately. All intimidation is wrong. Sectarianism is wrong. And it is appalling to see that this is happening in 2024. So I absolutely agree with the member that we should stand united against this, and I welcome the fact that across this House people have united in opposition to what has happened.
Ms Linda Dillon.
Thank you, and thank you to the Deputy First Minister for answers. Deputy First Minister, can you outline in terms of the Commission, do you believe that it is still beneficial and required going forward?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for her question. Look, absolutely. We know that for many, many thousands of victims and survivors, they continue to carry forward the pain of injuries, the loss that they have suffered, and many of them do continue to mourn. And I think it's incredibly sad as well that we have seen in recent years continued hurt being brought upon victims and survivors by words and actions. That should stop. It must stop. Victims and survivors have suffered the most in this place over the decades since the Troubles, and we should be there to support and help them, and that's why it's important that we have a Commissioner to champion the issues for victims and survivors, to fight for additional support, for example for those who are bereaved, to help people navigate through the likes of the severely injured pension process. But of course we also know that sadly for many, many thousands of victims they have not had justice, and therefore that fight continues, and we will be there to support them throughout that.
Mr Speaker, a previous Victims Commissioner, Patricia McBride, caused outrage after being appointed when she described her terrorist brother as an IRA volunteer killed in active service. Can the Deputy First Minister advise the House why she didn't veto her appointment to the Judicial Appointments Commission, given that views which endorse or express acceptance for violence and terrorism are not protected political opinions?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for his question. The arrangements for appointing commissioners to the Northern Ireland Judicial Appointments Commission are set out in the Justice Northern Ireland Act of 2002. I would make clear that this was a nomination nominated by the Lady Chief Justice. Ms Patricia McBride had served and continues to serve as a lay magistrate for the past 13 years since 2005. And regardless of what I may or may not think of her views and opinions, clearly in law it is not grounds to refuse a nomination on the basis of somebody's political opinion.
Cathal Boyle.
Everett Dahl, let hold question number 2, please.
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. We have been clear that we must build on the common ground that we all share to realise the potential of the site for the benefit of all. But we recognise that will require us to move with consensus and sensitivity. We are absolutely committed to working with the Maze Long Kesh Development Corporation to achieve that, no decisions have yet been made about the future of the site.
Mr. Boyle.
I'm going to thank the Minister for her answers, but just can the Minister respond in terms of regeneration of the site? Will there be a need to improve the road connection?
Minister.
Look, absolutely, as one of the local MLAs for Lagan Valley, in which the site sits, of course there is a recognition that that would require investment. Of course, we must move forward with consensus on the site. We must move forward in a way that does not cause any further hurt or offence in terms of the site. But any development of the site, if anybody has gone to the Balmoral show, for example, they will know the infrastructure challenges around the site, and indeed in recent years that has been improved significantly. I had the opportunity to speak at the rally against the family farm tax just last week at the site, and again I think the infrastructure challenges around the site were very clear to many of those many thousands of people who were attempting to attend that rally. So yes, of course, any development in the future would require infrastructure, a significant infrastructure investment.
Gilgai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Deputy First Minister. In April, my colleague Saoirse Eastwood led an adjournment debate on the Maze Lawn Cache site, and in that the First Minister made remark that you would get options from the board on how to proceed to unlock the potential of the site. And what options did the board provide you with in terms of how to unlock the potential of the site, and how will you proceed?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for her question. I understand that the member did indeed attend the site and spoke with the board there just last week. And indeed, as outlined in that debate, there will be a process of engaging with the board in relation to their views about the way forward. The board has just been recently appointed. They've just been in now a number of months, and I've no doubt that they will look at the previous plans and proposals and will look to revise those. And I think key to that, of course, as well, will be ensuring we maximise what is already there. The very successful Balmoral show and housing the RUAS. But of course, the Ulster Aviation Society going from strength to strength. 7,000 visitors over the Heritage Open weekend, which is an incredible testimony to their many volunteers that they have there and the wonderful collection. And again, I would urge anybody to go down and to visit there. And of course, the air ambulance, having been called out over 4,000 times since they took up a position at the site back in 2017. So there is much to work with, but we will look forward to hearing those proposals developed by the board and to consider those in due course.
Patsy Midlone.
Thanks very much, Gurna Kilnacolia, and thank you, Deputy First Minister. Can I ask just, previously it was said that the business plan would be revised now that the outcome of the internal relocation exercise is known. Can you provide us with an update on that work, please?
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. So a draft business plan was submitted, but of course that included some aspirations around further works that would be required, most of those to do with the health and safety and the protection of the site. As a member will be aware, the budget of course is incredibly difficult and many of those bids were not met. So therefore the board are revising that business plan. We would hope to get that very shortly. They will have had some confirmation of the budget envelope that they're working within, and they will be looking at that and prioritising what works. They're under a number of legal obligations, particularly because of the health and safety requirements of the site and of course the listed status of the buildings in terms of basic maintenance and protection. So they will be looking at that and we hope to get that very, very shortly, I would suspect in the next number of weeks.
Paul Fruit. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We met with the Vaccine Injured and Bereaved Support Group on the 10th of July 2024. The group shared their concerns and experiences with us in what was a powerful and emotive meeting. And we would like to thank them for being so open with us in relation to their difficult and painful experience. We know it was not easy for them to come along and to tell of their personal experiences. So on behalf of the group, we wrote to the Minister of Justice to raise an issue in respect of coroner's inquests and the group's concerns about a number of investigations that have identified as being related to COVID-19 vaccines. We've also written to the Minister of Health and asked him to consider issues around care pathways for those suffering from health issues potentially related to the COVID-19 vaccines. We understand the Minister of Health has since met with the group and hope that this will lead to further understanding of the wider issues for all impacted.
Mr. Fruit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for the answers, and also with meeting with the vaccine injured and bereaved, and of course then the actions that come out of that meeting. The Deputy First Minister may not be aware, but there's also, not only do we have FIBS NI operating in Northern Ireland doing sterling work, but we also have a new charity called UKCV Family, which represents all of the vaccine injured and bereaved throughout the United Kingdom, and they have a growing number of people who they help in Northern Ireland. UKCV Family
question, please, Mr.
have reached out to contact the First Minister, Deputy First Minister. Will the Deputy First Minister give a commitment to this House today that they will reach out to the charity UKCV Family?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for his question. It is the Health Minister that does take the lead on these issues, but of course it is important to speak directly, so we'll certainly look into that. I don't believe we've received a request, but if we have, we'll certainly look at that. And indeed, look, it's been incredibly powerful to hear the first-hand stories from those that have been impacted. There is that compensation scheme there, but I know from speaking to many of those that it is a very frustrating process, and I do think that more needs to be done by the UK Government to take a look at that scheme again, make it much easier in terms of applications, and indeed to lower the thresholds and look at the criteria to make sure that those who need that support through no fault of their own are able to access that in a more timely way.
Liz Kimmins.
The Deputy First Minister for answer so far. Can I ask the Deputy First Minister then to detail what further support the First Minister and Deputy First Minister may be able to provide in the time ahead?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for her question. The support that we can give will be largely with working through the Health Department, but we did write, as indicated, to the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Health to pick up a number of those issues, and I have to say, quite frankly, the frustrations of many around that table in terms of not getting those answers. I think the lack of a care pathway, many of these issues are medical issues. They do require that medical intervention, so we really are urging the Health Department and through the Trust for there to be those clear medical pathways to support people. And I think really fundamentally that GPs and those that are first engaged with those that have injuries, that they are very aware of what that could be and actually treat those people with the absolute dignity and respect that they deserve. And I think that many have felt that that hasn't happened in the past, and I think that we do need that to happen as we move forward.
Nicola Brogan.
Question number 4, please.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The investment strategy proposes a positive vision for the next 30 years, including detailed plans for investment and enabling actions over the next decade. It encompasses all areas of public infrastructure and includes a framework for planning and prioritising infrastructure investment. It also sets out the outcomes required of that investment and the mechanisms needed to ensure its efficiency and effective delivery. We are currently considering the draft investment strategy, after which we hope to be in a position to bring the strategy to the Executive. We expect this to happen in parallel with the final programme for government. Approval of the final investment strategy will then be a matter for the Executive.
Nicola Brogan.
Thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. The Deputy First Minister will no doubt agree that investing in infrastructure is key to growing our economy. So can the Minister therefore outline how she will ensure that the successful delivery of the investment strategy, please?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for an important question, because good infrastructure, the investment in infrastructure, the right infrastructure, are absolutely critical foundations for growing our economy and the delivery of our public services here in Northern Ireland. We see day in and day out the challenges that public infrastructure can bring to service delivery and impact that it can have on everyday lives of people. So look, we are determined through this investment strategy to try to tackle some of the big issues that have been barriers to delivery in the past. That includes, through the Strategic Investment Board, a very particular set of pieces of work to look at improvements in relation to the business case process, improvements to the procurement process, and of course, importantly, improvements to the planning process. We know that those 3 key issues can significantly slow down capital projects and investment. And look, I've said this before in this House, but it's very clear that if a project takes longer, it costs more. When capital projects cost more than originally projected, then we can do less with the capital money that we've got available, and we will never reach the potential or aspiration that we have. So improving the process is a huge part of our ability to deliver, and we're really focused on that at the moment.
Deborah Ruskin, please.
Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers so far. On the view, the Infrastructure Minister didn't recognise the Northern Ireland water figures of 19,000 developments which can't be connected because of capacity issues. We know that this is an issue in terms of housing associations and getting houses onto the system. So we also have the draft housing strategy coming forward. So how can we ensure money is ring-fenced for capital infrastructure Northern Ireland water projects, which will be vital in delivering our programme for government commitments?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for this question. This will be absolutely key to delivering against the 9 priorities I set out, which will be brought forward. Very positive response in the public consultation to all 9 of those priorities. But of course, you're absolutely right. If we are going to achieve those priorities, we need to invest in that infrastructure, which is currently a barrier. And quite frankly, we know what the challenges are. And I think it is important that we work together to get into problem-solving mode in relation to all of these issues, driving forward transformation of the process, ensuring better implementation and delivery. But of course, you're absolutely right, getting the right investment in the right place to ensure that we can unlock that potential. We've got a key priority to build more social and affordable housing. We are only going to be able to do that if we fix our water and sewage challenges. So we want to work with NI Water. We want solutions, not just a computer says no approach to these things. That will require investment, that will require us working with them, and will require them stepping up as well in terms of looking at those solutions and implementing that change.
Paula Bradshaw.
First Minister, for your answers. I was at the Northern Ireland Chamber banquet dinner last week as you were speaking, and Sinead and maybe others were there, and it was a wonderful occasion, and you spoke about the investment strategy. There was such a can-do attitude in the room. To what degree will the private sector be able to drive the prioritisation of the investment strategy? Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the member for her question. Indeed, I commend the NI Chamber for what was a very successful event. In fact, when I was saying the computer says no, that's what jumped out of my mind about the event on Thursday night. You're absolutely right. There's a can-do attitude. I believe that there is an optimism out there right throughout Northern Ireland and the business community. The budget was very challenging for them. I'm sure that she, like me, picked that up from many of the businesses there. Concerns about issues, for example, such as the national insurance increased contribution for employers, but other issues as well. So look, we need to work, and my key message on Thursday night was our determination, my determination to work hand in hand with the business community, because economic growth unlocks the potential of this place. It helps us in terms of our public service delivery and our core public services, but of course with that economic growth comes better jobs, good jobs, that investment in every part of Northern Ireland that we want to see. So of course we should be working very closely with the private sector and the business community, as I said, to find those solutions to the challenge that we face right now and to push through that vision of optimism, but a real tangible application and implementation of the changes that they want to see as well.
Matthew O'Toole.
Speaker, Minister, when you were at the dinner on Thursday night, and I don't begrudge you a night out, the Infrastructure Minister was on TV explaining that he didn't really think there were fundamental challenges with how NI Water was funded, but clearly there are, in the sense that houses are not being built. Major infrastructure developments in this region are being completely slowed down. You just said to your colleague that there needed to be practical action. You just said to Paula Bradshaw that we need to move from optimism into delivery. What is that going to look like? When are we actually going to see plans from the executive in terms of how you are going to meaningfully increase the funding for Northern Ireland Water? Because at the minute, it's just words.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. Indeed, I was representing the Northern Ireland Executive speaking at the NI Chamber dinner to show our support for the vital work that our business community, over 1,000 people gathered in at that dinner on Thursday night. So a good opportunity for us and for me on behalf of the Executive to emphasise how important it is for us to work both in partnership and collaboration. In fact, it is absolutely essential if we're going to have that economic growth. As indicated earlier on in response to another question, we are specifically looking at a number of key actions. That includes improvements in terms of planning, improvements in relation to procurement, and improvements in terms of the business case process. Those are all process aspects to this, but these are aspects that really slow down the delivery and implementation of our capital programme. In addition, we've extended the investment strategy period of time rather than just a 10-year period. we are looking to bring this to 2050. So for the first time, this will be an investment strategy that looks in the longer term over the course of the 30 years and allows for that planning. And thirdly, of course, we have seen the budget reset by the UK government that largely focused on revenue. We are anticipating that there will be announcements in relation to their capital plans, not just for the next year, but setting out their vision for the future. So we are hopeful that there will be additional capital that will be available, but we need to utilise that capital in a way that makes that meaningful difference. That means tackling the issues within water and sewage, having the right plan, making sure the capacity is there to deliver it, and making sure that the process is fit for purpose in terms of implementation.
Question 5 is withdrawn. I call Ciara Ferguson.
Mr. Speaker, question 6.
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 6 and 13 together. As you are aware, the Together Building a United Community Strategy, or TBUC, reflects the Executive's commitment to improving community relations here between people of different political, ethnic and religious backgrounds. Since its launch in 2013, we can all recognise that considerable progress has been made with a number of headline action targets fully achieved. Progress continues to be made towards other targets in often complex areas of work. But we know there remains work to be done, and we want to ensure that our approach to good relations meets the needs of everyone in our society. And we acknowledge that since the first TBUC strategy was launched, our society has become increasingly diverse, and there is a need to ensure that our approach to good relations effectively engages all of those who live here and creates a truly united society. The final draft of the Together Building United Community Review is currently under development by officials. We expect recommendations to be submitted to us shortly. Those recommendations will help shape the starting point for designing a refreshed approach to good relations, as well as informing the timeline for its development.
Ferguson.
Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer thus far? Could I ask the Deputy First Minister what will be the impact of the cross-cutting commitment to peace being included within the draft programme for government?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for her question. Sadly, we see globally that instability. We see the lack of peace and how that impacts so detrimentally in terms of any place. And that remains the case for here. We absolutely need there to be that underlying agenda of peace to everything that we do. And that is why we made the decision that for Northern Ireland that would be a cross-cutting underlying mission to ensure that stability that allows us to deliver. And that is why, since I've come into this post, we have been working incredibly hard to create that stability for the Northern Ireland Executive to deliver. If we are going to deliver against our programme for government, if we're going to deliver that meaningful change to change people's lives for the better, then we do need that stability, and we need that united approach of driving that positive change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there an acceptance within the Executive Office that sectarianism and racism are two sides of the same coin, and that on that basis there is a need for a fundamental review of good relations policy?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. There are similarities, no doubt, that very often such sentiments are based on prejudice, they're based on bias, they're based on a lack of understanding. There are many, many similarities, but there are also a number of differences as well. And I think it's important that any approach in the way forward is sufficiently nuanced to really take into account and understand the impact of that on people, and trying to move in to support and help. The underlying issues which we can tackle through prevention, through education, through those projects, and of course what it is that we need to do to include everyone across our society and make sure that everybody feels that they can play that positive role as part of our united community moving forward. So while I agree with him to some extent, there are particular aspects of that, and I think that requires a very distinct and particular approach while we gather that together within our overarching aim of building that united community.
Gary Middleton.
And I agree with the Deputy First Minister in that a lot of good work has been done through TBUC. Would the Minister agree that we need to ensure that any review ensures that programmes reach those who are often harder to reach, including those PVL communities within my own constituency in Foyle?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. I think it is incredibly important that every part of our society feels that they can play a positive role moving forward. And that is no matter where you're from, what you believe, what your background is, what your identity is. And that includes absolutely those from the Loyalist community that very often are and have been vilified without good reason. That there are many, many people within the Loyalist community that play an incredibly important role within communities, within organisations, and they will play a very positive role in the future of this place as well. So he's absolutely right. One of the characteristics of recent challenges that we've had on the streets is that many of those people who were engaged in that were not people who were involved in some of the projects and the organisations, and therefore it was very difficult to speak with those young people in particular, to encourage them to come off the streets, to encourage them to get involved in more positive projects. But that is the coalface of this type of work. We do need to engage with those young people no matter how difficult it is, and we have a determination to support those fantastic organisations and agencies that are working on that coalface to really support and to bring about that peace.
Declan Kearney.
For a shock at the whole.
The First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Consultation on the draft programme for government closed on Monday, the 4th of November. In total, 1,375 responses have been received. Work is now ongoing to analyse all responses received and produce a consultation report for consideration by the Executive. Once this has been considered, we will finalise the programme for government and bring it to the Assembly for cross-community approval.
Kearney.
Minister, can you confirm for me that there will be measurable targets contained in the final version of the PFG?
Absolutely. There will be measurable targets in the programme for government. I think it is also important to say, though, that we know that the budget at the moment is very challenging. We are working very hard, for example, with the Health Minister, with the Minister for Education and others to try to ensure a satisfactory outcome in relation to public pay settlements. And we know that there is a huge pressure on the budget to try to do so, and that is likely to be the same into next year. But the key thing is that we set realistic targets, but targets that have some aspiration about them, but also that those targets are scalable, that when additional money is available, then we are able to grow our ambition in terms of a reset of those targets to increase what it is that we need to achieve. So we're actively looking at this at the moment, and yes, there will be those targets set down.
Sinead McLaughlin.
Speaker, Deputy First Minister, recently at the Executive Office Committee, your lead departmental official was enabled actually to outline what type of targets would be measured. Can you just give us any specifics in relation to the types of measurements that you will be looking at? And also, they were unable to express the type of measurements that would go into ensuring regional balance throughout all of the departments and their commitments in the programme for government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can advise the member that I wasn't aware of watched that evidence session. But in terms of the targets and the measurement of this, it'll be done in two ways. So the first will be by the set of wellbeing indicators. So that will measure against a baseline set, and then on a continual basis, improvements against that indicator will be monitored and reported. That is all going to be available online. It's currently live online. But of course, some of those indicators will evolve and change depending on the final programme for government. So that will show you real and meaningful progress against a wide range of targets and indicators that's set down in the wellbeing framework. And then the second way it will be measured is through the specific targets against each of the priorities. Now, one of the reasons why they may not have been able to give you the specifics of that at this time is that those will of course be led by the ministers who are leading that particular priority. So for example, on health waiting lists, that will depend on the budget that is received and then what will come back from the Health Minister in terms of the specific targets. Similar with social and affordable housing will be led by and will come forward by the Minister of Communities. The key thing for us will be to try to ensure that there is a consistency in terms of the types of targets that are being set down, that they are realistic, that they can have an associated budget within the very difficult budget envelope that we have, and that they are deliverable as well.
Just McNulty.
Cash talked.
I thank the member for the question. Enhancing our reputation and relationships internationally has been and will continue to be of vital importance, and this is at the core of our international work. However, we must stress that foreign policy is a reserved matter for the United Kingdom government, and therefore we've had no engagement on this.
That draws to a conclusion the opportunity for questions. Move to topical questions, and I call Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deputy First Minister, if the independent review that the Environment Minister has appointed comes back and recommends the creation, as multiple reviews have done in the past, of an independent environmental protection agency, will you and your party support one being delivered in law?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. We'll take a look at that report when it reports back.
Admirable, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Admirable concision from the Deputy First Minister. We've had a lot of words during the previous part of the question session, but it is clear that we are failing on climate and the environment, and there is precious little ambition in the programme for government, or more broadly from the executive. We've seen the impact of climate change in recent days in flooding. This isn't a theoretical lefty obsession. This is real, and it's affecting homes and businesses across this region. Deputy First Minister, are you committed to climate change? Will you commit that if there are substantive proposals to bring an independent environmental protection agency and meaningful carbon budgets and a climate action plan, that you will do your job and make sure they're supported and implemented and can get through the executive?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. There is a piece of legislation that was passed by this House. That piece of legislation sets down targets. Those targets are a legal requirement. So, of course, everything we say is within that context. It is important to say that any of the proposals, including an independent environmental agency or body, is not going to be the silver bullet in terms of these issues. These agencies do exist elsewhere, and there are still significant environmental issues. But of course, it would be entirely wrong of me to prejudge the outcome of that report. And as I have said, I will take a look at that report when it is produced and make decisions on that, depending on what that report says.
Alan Chambers.
Deputy First Minister, I understand that the previous stated position of your office and the executive was that health was their #1 priority. Can you confirm if that is still the position?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. And indeed, the health of people throughout Northern Ireland is such a critical issue. Not just in terms of their own person, in terms of the pain that people are suffering sitting on a waiting list, in terms of trying to ensure that everyone in Northern Ireland can live a healthy and thriving life. But of course the impact on the economy of people not being able to go back to employment or having to come out of employment because they're sitting on a health waiting list. So I can absolutely assure the member we need that transformation of the health service. I want to see that transformation of the health service. I want to see the NHS here work for everyone, and we have made that very firm commitment right at the heart of the programme for government, and indeed working hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with the Health Minister to try to ensure that transformation and change to bring down those health waiting lists and improve those outcomes for people.
Mr. Chambers.
Thank you. I take it from that answer, Minister, that it still is your first priority. I'm sure that the Minister would agree that avoiding industrial action during this winter is absolutely essential. Can she detail what conversations she's had with the Health Minister to try and find a solution to the budget shortfall that currently is denying health staff the pay awards that they've been promised?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for his question. I think it's incredibly important that we do everything that we can do to ensure that our public sector workers receive fair pay. I set out very clearly when the budget settlement was announced that we knew that this was going to be very, very difficult for all ministers, but particularly for those departments that have a significant public sector pay pressure, and that included the Department of Education and the Department of Health. I can assure the member that I've met with the Health Minister on a number of occasions, along with the First Minister and the Finance Minister, first of all to assure him of our support in what he is trying to do, but also secondly because it is a key piece of work for us to do everything in our power to get to the right outcome on this. And we wanted to emphasise to the Health Minister that he was not alone on this fight, that we will be working hard with him to do everything that we can, and that remains my commitment today.
Linda Dillon.
Thank you to the Deputy First Minister. Deputy First Minister, you will be aware that we are beginning today with 16 days of action against gender-based violence. Can you update us on what the Executive Office has done to date in relation to violence against women and girls, please?
Thank you, and I thank the member for a very important question, particularly on this day. Today marks White Ribbon Day, known as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and the start of a period known as 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Right from the outset, the First Minister and myself made tackling violence against women and girls a key priority. The levels of violence and the level of murder of women and girls in Northern Ireland is far, far too high. And we recognise that this will require us working collaboratively with agencies, with the PSNI, with schools, with families and communities to tackle this. The best way to tackle this will be prevention. And that is not going to be a short-term issue. It's not going to be done tomorrow or next week, as I know the member is very well aware. But I was pleased that we were able to produce not just our strategy on ending violence against women and girls, but of course the associated action plan. We've got £3 million over the course of the remainder of this year and next year, both in the Challenge Fund and the Change Fund. It is not the totality of our aspirations with this. It will not solve all issues, but we believe that this is a very valuable start to really working together to tackle the scourge of violence against women and girls.
Mrs. Bill.
Thank you. And just to ask the Minister, do you have confidence in the other executive ministers in terms of our Education Minister, our Health Minister, our Communities Minister and our Dairy Minister, that they are all bought into this strategy and that they are investing where they can in ensuring that the scourge of violence against women and girls is not only ended but actually prevented at the other end?
Sure.
Look, absolutely. There are a number of different elements to this, not least from a Minister of Justice perspective of speeding up justice, from an Education Minister's perspective about that really important preventative work that can happen within schools and the youth club sector. But of course every minister has a role to play, and that's why I was particularly pleased that not only our strategy but also the associated action plan was endorsed by the entire executive, and this is an executive programme. And there was, of course, that agreement by the executive to ring-fence that £3 million as an initial amount of money. I was also particularly pleased that our launch of that strategy coincided with the joint strategies between the Department of Justice and Health in relation to domestic violence, because, of course, we know that this is not just a female issue. There's very particular issues on that, and I think it's right we had that dedicated strategy, but it is an issue right across in terms of tackling violence, but particularly that domestic violence.
Dixon.
May I ask the Deputy First Minister what action her department has taken with regards to the comprehensive review on the appalling racist attacks in Northern Ireland in July and August, and indeed subsequent sporadic attacks, following the motion passed in this Assembly on the 12th of November?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the member was present last week whenever we responded to the debate. I think it was last week. On this very, very important issue, and I outlined a number of strands of work that was taking place, not just led by the Executive Office, but indeed across a number of different departments and agencies. So after that meeting, we had that discussion within the department about pulling many of those strands together into a comprehensive review with a particular aim of identifying the very things that were talked about during that debate. So we would hope to give an update on that in due course, but that work has commenced.
Mr. Dixon.
So, Deputy First Minister, can I take it then on the basis that this Assembly on the 12th of November called for a short, sharp review, that we will get that review completed by the end of this calendar year?
Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, as outlined during that debate, my response to that debate, a significant amount of this work had already commenced. And I know that the PSNI, for example, had also been looking at what they could do. We've been working with a number of our community organisations on the ground. Some of those areas, for example, have been within our urban villages area under our Together Building United community. So looking to see what more could we do to reach out. Very conscious, as I said earlier on in these questions, that many of those young people who were caught up in that would be what we would describe as hard to reach. So these are not young people that are participants within many of those projects on the ground, but that doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't try our best to ensure that we can engage with those. It probably requires a different approach, but we're very much looking at that to try to really take that on and to change the outcomes for the better in those areas.
Mr. DeLargy is not in his place. I call Danny Donnelly.
Just to ask the Deputy First Minister what role the Executive Office will have in ensuring that the priorities set out in the programme for government, such as reducing waiting lists, will actually be achieved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we play a really key role because As outlined during the process of the consultation, we made clear that the draft programme for government priorities were not the totality of what government would be doing. Within each department, and indeed with cross-departmental work, there will be a huge range of additional activities that take place. But what is in the draft programme for government in terms of those 9 priorities represent a smaller number of key things that will be driven by the executive in collaboration with those ministers. And indeed, we are creating that internal delivery unit approach, an approach which has been proven to have worked elsewhere, a unit that will have a very particular and focused attention to a change and achieving the targets that we're hoping to achieve in terms of each of those priorities. So it will be a new approach, but it is one that we believe is required because, quite frankly, if we keep doing what we've always done, we will just keep getting the results that we've always got. And we do want to genuinely make that real difference in terms of delivery.
Mr Donnelly.
Speaker, and thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer. How will the public and indeed members be reported to? Will there be regular reports to this Assembly, or will there be reports released?
Mr Speaker, well, as outlined earlier, a key part of that will be our wellbeing framework and our wellbeing indicators. So that will be a significant number of indicators that will be updated in live time and real time to show progress against that. Now, some of those will be reporting quarterly, or it depends on how the baseline is measured, but there's going to be a range of indicators. Those will be open to the public to be able to pop on at any time and take a look as to what's happening and to see the direction of travel and if we're turning the curve against some of those key ones. And secondly, I believe that the committees will have a key role in terms of the particular targets against the particular priority that is led by a particular department. Although I think it's important to say that we don't want this just to fracture off back into silos. These are executive priorities, and therefore that will require an all-executive approach. And key, of course, to that will be the executive prioritising the budget or any additional flexibility on budget towards meeting the targets on those 9 key priorities.
Owen Crawford.
Deputy First Minister, can I ask, how is your department working to promote social inclusion for underrepresented communities in Northern Ireland?
Deputy Minister.
Thank you. Look, there's a range of work that is underway. A number of our equality areas of work are equality strategies around older people, for example, people with disabilities, on the basis of gender, have moved to the Department of Communities. So the Department of Communities does take a lead on bringing forward most of our social inclusion strategies now. But of course, at the heart of the programme for government will be that principle that we want everyone in Northern Ireland to be able to succeed, regardless of your characteristics, regardless of where you live, regardless of where you come from. So it'll be key that that is entirely mainstreamed in terms of our implementation. So the projects, the way that we roll these things out, both in terms of the revenue, but importantly the capital investment, must be done in a way that benefits all communities and to be designed in a way that takes into account a number of those key characteristics.
Mr Crawford.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Can you update us of any new initiatives aimed specifically at enhancing support for marginalised groups?
First Minister.
Thank you. Yes, well, there's been a commitment to bringing forward those social inclusion strategies, so they will be very tailored, looking at those particular groups, and they're loosely based around each of the Section 75 groups. That is the lead within the Department of the Communities, and I know a significant amount of work has already been underway. From our point of view within the Executive Office, we deal with a number of groups that have been and continue to be marginalised, not least victims and survivors, for example, where we have dedicated funding through our Victims Service. We also approach that by a number of different commissioner-type roles, such as the Older Persons Commissioner, to promote the issues associated with older people. So we will be moving to make better reference to that within the programme for government, but of course working with our colleagues, particularly in the Department of Communities, to ensure that all of our communities can benefit.
Connie Egan.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Today is the first day of 16 days to end violence against women and girls. Can I please have an update on the research included in the delivery plan on men and boys' attitudes into violence against women and girls?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yes, that work is continuing against our action plan, and good progress is being made. We hope to be in a position then to update the committee in relation to progress against all of those very shortly.
That draws to an end questions to the Deputy First Minister. We now move to questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and I call Mark Durkan. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
It is widely recognised that Northern Ireland's natural environment